Hello everybody, it's Will here from Arcane Worlds and welcome to a new series called Dev Diaries. This is the first episode in the series and it's going to be a series where we talk about all things for the Hive, in particular gameplay. We're going to be discussing some of the elements that we haven't gone through in some of our previous devlogs, so stick around, it's going to be really fun. We're talking skills and combat today. We're going to be taking a deep dive into some other insects. If you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can get updated every time we drop a new video. With that being said, let's get into it. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about combat, and we're going to go through some of the skills that you can upgrade that are related directly to each individual bug. We've only got a couple of bugs and a couple of their life stages to go through. No, I'm saying bugs because yes, we have a spider. But there are also many other systems which we're going to be going through in other videos. So if you see some really cool stuff on the side here, don't worry, we are going to cover it, just not in this video. So first I'd like to talk about the basic combat system itself. We'll go through all of these skills. Now you're going to notice across each bug, you're going to see some areas that are replicated, like fortitude, agility, growth. They're actually going to be common throughout each insect or bug, because there's kind of like a similar structure that's going to be in every insect. There's certain things that are really core to the game, but then each bug or insect is going to have their own variable skills which are unique to their species. Now, starting with the offensive line, it's really important to understand how combat actually works in order to understand how these skills will actually, take effect in game. The skills really, like most RPGs, although this is more of a live sort of action play game, the skills in most RPGs, they are really there to accompany and to add flavors and to create different builds. And that's the same in for the Hive. But really the star of the show, no doubt, is the actual physics-based combat system, which these skills kind of complement. And what I mean by physics-based combat system is we've taken a lot of inspiration from games like Bannerlord, Warband, which were made by the same guys. That kind of physics, real life, feels like you're controlling a real warrior with a real sword that's chopping into a real kind of individual. That's what we like. And we want to recreate that in the insect or bug world. So more specifically, what that means is each insect part, head, legs, thorax, abdomen, will all have individual health parts. And obviously we're using a ragdoll system. You can also disable legs. So if you damage a leg too far, maybe it doesn't fall off, but it just goes limp and ragdoll. And by doing that, because everything is done procedurally, it means that it will actually affect the way the insect moves. So we want to create like a real life feel to the combat. And so bear that in mind when I'm going through these skills, because it's really, these skills are here to complement that existing really fun system. So one thing to really think about in addition to this is that combat damage itself specifically will really depend on physics itself. So that means the mass of the object, the speed, the angle, they all affect the damage. So you can imagine flying in at high speed and then biting is going to do more damage than just being static and biting. So without further ado, let's get into some of these skills. Let's start with the black ant, and then we're going to move up through some of these other species here. Really talked about the combat. Let's really start with the offensive line. So you can see it starts with the mandibles upgrade, which is your bite. Now, there is a very common theme throughout the mandibles line, which you'll see in pretty much every bug, and that is critical strikes, severing strikes, and armor piercing. If you're familiar with RPG games or similar games like for the Hive, armor piercing is probably no stranger for you. So it basically means by investing into your armor piercing line, you're going to do more armor piercing damage, bypassing the armor of other insects. Really good if you're maybe in specific areas that deal with enemies that have high armor, like the rhino beetle, or you're just coming up against them a lot and you want to deal with them. So that's a really important line. Now, the severing strikes are really fun. So that increases the percentage chance of severing a limb, a head, or a body part when the part is damaged. So obviously upgrading that could be really fun. There's some really interesting builds that could come of that. chopping heads off, chopping legs off. Who doesn't want to do that, right? Again, if you've played RPGs in the past, you'll be quite familiar with critical strike. So we've got a critical strike line which increases the damage of attacks by a certain amount when a critical strike is made. So this will increase both the chance and potentially the damage output that you can do. Obviously a very interesting line if you're going down that way. Now, the ants have an additional one here, which is blood loss. Something to note is these may change closer to release. There may be some things that we just simply test and go, you know what, that's not as fun as we thought it was, or it doesn't fit. Right now we have the blood loss, which is damage over time. So I quite like that one anyway. Moving around, so we've got fortitude, which is a stronger exoskeleton, so essentially armor. The ant is a bug that can benefit from strong armor. Some other bugs, which we're going to go through in a minute, don't. They still have the armor, but you might find less. So for example, a fuzzy little spider, a soft fuzzy little spider is going to have less armor upgrade path than an ant. You may also note that some of these only go 3-way or 4 dots along. That's not necessarily representative of how it will be in the game. For example, this may have much more armor line in it and less in some other areas. And also it does depend on where you are on the species line. So a worker will have only a certain amount of armor that can go up to, in order to unlock the full line you might have to go to queen, for example. That's going to also emphasize some different paths that you take as you grow. You may start with a bit of armor and then realize as you go to queen that you're going to go more down vitality. That's really the queen strength. Speaking of vitality, we've got the increased health line, really important, especially if you're planning on taking hits. Maybe if you're slow, queen, she probably is not going to be getting away too quickly, so you're going to want to really maximize on her key strength, which is health. But a little jumping spider might need a little less health and is going to avoid being hit altogether, so you're going to have naturally less there. One that comes off of the health increase is the resistances to poison and venom. They're going to be really, really important for the hive. Obviously coming up against species like scorpions and spiders, and honestly learning about bugs doing for the hive, you really realize that all insects and bugs tend to have something nasty. So this is probably going to be a really important one. Now moving along, the ant actually has its own another unique skill, which is the acidic assault, which is a formic acid defensive spray. On its own is, it's a useful thing. It's more of an escape tactic. So it's sprayed at close range, causes damage over time, so small amounts, but it causes stamina drain. Stamina, which we'll go into, is vital for all actions in For the Hive. It's jumping. I know insects can't jump, but we've put it in because it's fun. Sprinting, flying fast, attacks, they all use stamina. So actually, if you're chasing a group of ants, they're all spraying you and your stamina gets drained, the tide could turn actually pretty quick. So it is a really useful skill and something that is also pretty annoying to play against. But, if you've got enough stamina, you can eat that up, right? So maybe another reason to invest in the endurance line, which is the stamina, which, as I say, is all key actions in For the Hive. Now, another one that's really important here is the growth. Our growth increases the size and the mass. Now, why are they important? Size is important because it actually affects how easy it is to attack other objects and interact with other things. You can imagine if you're coming up against a huge rhino beetle and you're tiny, it's going to be pretty easy for the rhino beetle to hit you before you hit it. So size is really important, and also, hey, it's kind of fun having large ants. Now, it will obviously be within reason. They're not going to be stupidly large compared to other things. We've kind of got roughly similar scales. There are certain bugs that are bigger than others. It's not going to be true to real life because it's not fun. But this is really fun, who doesn't want to be a huge ant, like a crazy amount of acidic assault, right? So super fun. But mass is really important because, as we mentioned in the beginning, our combat system is physics-based, which means that the more mass you have, when you add velocity into your movement, will actually act as a damage multiplier for attacks. So, i.e. sprinting fast, a lot of mass, then the physical attack, the damage can really get increased. And when you stack that with things like critical strike, it can really make a big difference. That will be a really fun line to go down. Next, we've got the agility line, which are faster legs, so faster movement speed. That's straightforward. The ant also has charge, which is just running in and ramming into things. It's actually pretty weak for the ant, but it's still there. Again, it's something we want to test. I feel like we'll probably end up keeping it just because it's fun. Why not? Compared to some other bugs that have charge, like the rhino beetle, you know, obviously the damage is going to be way less for the ant than it is for the rhino beetle, simply because of the mass, and also it's not a natural skill for the ant to have. Last but not least, we've got the senses line. We've kept the senses line pretty bare for now. We do intend on fleshing that out even more as we get further along in development, but for now we've got greater food detection range, so being able to detect food, really useful, make it easier to find food and decrease the hassle of the grind. Enemy detection range, obviously who doesn't want to know where their enemies are a bit sooner. And also more detailed enemy info. At a higher level, you'll be able to know a little bit more about the enemy's stamina level, a bit more about their actual level, their damage that they can do, you know, a bit more info to give you more details on whether you want to go in or not, right? Whether you want to disengage or engage. So that should be a really useful feature to invest in. Okay, so moving on, we now have the jumping spider. Now, very quickly, you're going to see, as I mentioned in the beginning, some of the similar lines, which we won't go into again, which are vitality, endurance, growth, fortitude, agility, and then you've got your standard attacks, piercing strikes, severing strikes, and critical strikes, which remain constant across all species. There are some unique things in the jumping spider, of course. It is completely different to the ant, and the game style is completely different in that they play more like a rogue, if you're more familiar with RPGs. Let's start perhaps with the attacks here, and then we'll finish with the lightning leap. So in the Fangs upgrade, you have obviously your standard ways, but then you've also got the venom, the paralytic strikes. Really useful for this guy because he doesn't like getting hit, or she doesn't like getting hit as much. So it's all about really striking in, disabling your opponent. It does damage over time, immobilizes them, doing what you can, jumping out again, going back in. So it's really, that's the game, you know, kind of glass cannon, but a little bit more subtle. I think Venom is really fun, you know, and who doesn't like immobilizing prey? I mean, that's kind of cool. And yeah, just the idea of Venom, I think, is great fun. Now, the other line is the treachery line, which is, again, if you're familiar with the rogues, we've got a backstab. So essentially, you will get damage bonuses when attacks are dealt from behind, which further lends into the gameplay, which is about really choosing your battles and striking in a more organized fashion, right? The idea is that you're going to strike in from the back, you're going to paralyze your prey, do a ton of damage, jump out, try not to get hurt. Obviously, you're going to upgrade that and get more and more damage as you go along. So they stack. Now, the last thing that stacks is in the agility line is the lightning leap. Now, the lightning leap is really special in the fact that the jumping spider can jump farther than any other bug. Not only that, but as you upgrade, it will get further and further and further, so you can really hit something before it even knows you're there. Not only that is, as you upgrade, the speed of the jump is going to increase, so it's going to be this super fast lightning attack, almost like you're teleporting in out of nowhere. Now, the cool thing is at the end of the jump, there is a bite, and so the bite gets stacked with backstab and paralytic strikes. So you can imagine jumping in, hitting the back, paralyzing, tons of damage, out you go, in again, just in and out. You know, facing a group of these is going to be a real pain to deal with, so you want to catch them early, maybe sneak up on them somehow. Now, moving on, we've got my personal favorite, which is the Termite. In particular here, we've got a Termite soldier, and again, we've got all of the standard lines, which I'm not going to go into, the standard 3 attacks there. But there are 2 specials here which I really love. So number 1 is so in the mandibles upgrade, you've got the acid spray. So acid spray is minor AoE, damage over time, which is burning. Burning basically does extra damage to armor. So once it eats up that armor, it doesn't go back down. It does its normal damage. It just does extra damage to armor. Now, so on its own, you know, it will be cool and will be useful. You know, AoE is always great, especially to groups. And at higher levels, it could actually be pretty nasty. But where the termite comes in is that there's multiple termites. And that starts to get real nasty. And then when you add in the fact that termites can really armor themselves up, you know, they can be a bit of a stubborn foe. Lots of them, well armored, all spitting acid at you. Not only that, the termites will be able to do quite high damage with their actual physical damage with these chompers. they've got some pretty big mandibles on them, so expect some pretty nice damage from the termite. You know, strong armor piercing, just strong base damage compared to some other bites, which is, you know, fun. I quite like the idea of just tearing things to shreds. The other thing that they have, which is super fun, is taunt. Taunt sounds kind of a bit dull, to be honest, when I say it. But I think it's one of the most useful skills that you can have in For the Hive. You know, if you come up against a group of bugs, let's say a group of jumping spiders, you can taunt one in, and all of you and your gang can then gang up on that spider and absolutely tear it to pieces. So really useful. The survivability factor that you get from taunt is really huge. Let me know down below what you think of the termites. Particularly interested to hear if you guys have any other thoughts. We're probably going to add in charge to the termite as well, because they do have that kind of bulky sort of feel to them, even though they're small. But, you know, small but mighty is really the termite, and I just really love them. I think the models are absolutely stunning. So moving on, and perhaps our final bug in today's video is going to be the Honeybee. Now, the Honeybee is really, really fun, and a completely different playstyle to the others that we've gone through so far. The main difference between the bee and some of the other insects we've gone through, or bugs I should say, today, are obviously the flight, and the attacking is kind of completely different. They've got all of the standard things. You might see the mandibles line is a little less. The bee does, I mean, it can do damage with the mandibles, don't get me wrong, but it's not their core. So they still have the mandibles line, and they still have armor piercing and severing strikes, which is awesome. So it's a little bit more limited to encourage a slightly different kind of play style. The bee might find itself in these situations where they're going head on, and they can deal with opponents. There's no problem there, but really where they rely on is that beautiful stinger. Now, in the sting, there are 3 different lines. It's very different kind of gameplay to some of the other, as we've already said. Which brings us to the next part, which is the sting. So the sting has 3 lines, and so you might see that the armor piercing has been moved here. Already we're looking at adding armor piercing damage to the sting, so armor piercing to the physical damage that has sting. So by the way, each node here, the initial nodes, are upgradable themselves, so you might be able to put in just your points into sting without these things, and that increases your damage with sting. Then increasing this increases your armor piercing segment of that damage that is there. We've then also got the critical strikes path, which we've already explained, and then we've also got the venom. Now, the venom for the bee is particularly nasty. It causes damage over time, but not like damage over time for the other insects. It causes high damage over time. So they're going to be multiple whopping damages that hit kind of like waves. You know, so it's not small little bits of like poison damage, for instance. It's going to be real hits of damage, and the more you upgrade, obviously, the more waves you get of venom damage that you do, and the higher damage that you can do as well. Now, it also causes stamina drain, so you can start to see how hitting in with the damage, the stamina drain, so they can't sprint away quickly, they can't attack back. You know, it's really going to start getting nasty. Now, with the sting, it does do damage to self. As you upgrade, it will be less and less. The idea is that you really want to upgrade that, so your sting, so that you can kind of use it more and more often. But really a high damage item attack, which you're going to be using slightly more carefully than some other attacks, but nevertheless it's really going to be one that finishes your foes off. Now, how does this sting actually work? And this is something that we really discussed in detail for the Hive, because the mechanic of maybe attacking air to ground and air to air is kind of a bit complicated. So that brings us into the next part, which is dive bomb. Dive bomb is the next really unique skill for the bee, which you will also get for all of the other bee-like insects, so, you know, hornets, wasps. And dive bomb simply means that you can fly forwards with your stinger facing forward. So the idea is you'll basically aim your stinger and fly directly into the enemy bug, stinging them, hitting them really hard. You've got the speed from the flight, you've got the maybe a bit of mass behind it. you've got the upgrade of the armor piercing, the venom, all of that, the critical strikes. You're hitting in one big attack, which hopefully finishes your target in one go. If not, your goal is to really get up in the air again and try and hit again, right? So that's really the goal for the bee. It's using that dive bomb to really take out opponents. Now, you can also sting while you're on the ground, so ground to ground. You can sting directly. There's obviously going to be a little bit less damage just using the sting compared to a dive bomb because of the speed variable, which acts as a multiplier to damage. Yeah, some really interesting differences in all of these 4 characters already. I think the bee is just going to be a super fun one to play. Obviously, we've also got the senses, which is greater pollen detection. As the bee, your game is really about collecting pollen, bringing it back to your hive. And we'll go through in some other videos how these kind of systems play into your game as well, because actually you're going to be using pollen for all sorts of other stuff. You're going to be using these, this is like an in-game currency for, increasing your party size, upgrading other things, etc. So completing other actions in game require pollen. So that's it for now. I think that really gives a nice overall summary. As I said in the beginning, I really love to hear your thoughts on some of the skills that we've gone through today for some of these cool bugs. Let us know what you think, if you love them or hate them. Don't forget as well, we also have a poll going on in one of our Discord groups, and that poll is to decide for the next species to take place in For the Hive. The next species is guaranteed to be a spider. We have 4 different spiders available to choose from. Right now, it looks like the Goliath is second. Sorry, I thought it was winning because I pressed that and it was all lit up. It made me hopeful, but no, it's the wolf spider right now that's in the lead. We've also got the mouse spider and the huntsman, 4 really awesome spiders, deadly creatures with devastating attacks. So please feel free to jump into our Discord and cast a vote. I'm also going to put the vote on Facebook. Love hearing your opinions, it's always fun. And also don't forget, we're very available in Discord if you want to chat to us directly at any time. We love to hear from you. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you all for your time today. For the Hive, and see you in the next video.